In terms of the question of when and how often should I fast and how long should I fast, I'm going to give you the most annoying lawyer answer ever. Sorry, still a lawyer, can't help it, which is that it depends. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Energetically Efficient Show. I'm Kristin Rowell, and I'm so excited to have you here with me today. So today we're going to talk about intermittent fasting, or fasting rather, part 2. I already did a part 1 on this where I talked to you about the basics of fasting, why we might consider fasting, what is autophagy, what are the different lengths of fast. And so if you haven't checked out that episode yet, I do recommend that you go back and listen to that one first, because I'm not going to go through all the basics again. And this is going to really go beyond what we talked about in the first episode on fasting. So some of the questions that I received when I polled my community for what would you like to hear more about is people really want to hear specifically, and I know this is a lot of women that are asking, but intermittent fasting is a tool or strategy for women in their 40s and 50s. And I am a woman in my late 40s, and I do practice intermittent fasting, so I'd love to talk about that. Of course, intermittent fasting may not be for everyone. I'm going to talk about that and when you might consider either backing off of it or not using it. And then I also got questions about the fact that people have been intermittent fasting either regularly, consistently, or inconsistently for a number of years, but now they're hearing conflicting reports about this. And I alluded to this in the first episode I did on fasting, but I didn't really do a deep dive about it. So we're going to talk about that today. So where I want to start with the fasting topic today is sort of where we left off last time, which was talking about the programming that we have around food. So as you recall, when I left you off in the last fasting episode, I left you with the thinking about what does it really mean to have breakfast, and why are we eating at all these programmed times throughout the day when all that breakfast really means is it's the time of the day that we break our fast. And our fast, of course, started whenever we stopped eating the day before. It includes all of those hours that we're sleeping, and that includes however many hours rather that we go in the morning until we finally eat our food. So remember, 12 hours is fasting, but anything beyond that can be sort of a bonus as it relates to fasting. So I get this question a lot, like, honestly, Kristin, how often should we fast? Like, when should I fast? How often should I do it? Should I do it every day? Should I cycle? I've heard questions from people about, don't you want to like confuse your metabolism? There's all sorts of funny sayings out there and anecdotes, and like people have different experiences of fasting. So I'm going to give you, in terms of the question of when and how often should I fast and how long should I fast, I'm going to give you the most annoying lawyer answer ever. Sorry, still a lawyer, can't help it, which is that it depends. But the truth is, and I was trained in nutrition at the Nutritional Therapy Association, and one of the things that we emphasized from the beginning of the course and the beginning of that program, and I now sit on the board of directors of that organization and am getting a second credential through that organization, what we really focus on at the Nutritional Therapy Association, and I believe this is so important for everyone to hear, is that we are all bio-individuals. Okay. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach for everyone. And I'm sorry to tell you that, because it truly is one of those annoying answers, I know. And so you're going to have to use a little bit of your own intuition here. You're going to have to tune into your own body, and you're going to have to decide what's right for you. But I want to talk to you about some of the parameters that you might use in order to do that. So when I think about when, how often should I fast, how long should I fast, etc., I'm looking at a variety of factors. Okay. So one of those factors, of course, is how much or how little body fat do you have on your body? Because remember, if we want to start dipping into our body fat stores as a source of fuel for our body, we're going to have to cut out the glucose, and we're going to have to cut out the dietary fat, because we don't want to give our body any more storage fuel. Because if we give it more storage fuel, all it's going to do is continue to store more fat on the body instead of use that body fat. So one of the things I'm going to look at is how much body fat is on the body. Another thing I'm going to look at is, what are my average blood sugars? And this isn't something that you can just guess or pick out of a hat. It's one of the reasons, and I apologize because my sticker's coming off a little bit, that's called too much sweating, too much sauna, and I've had the sticker on for a little bit. So this is my Stelo, I think that's how you pronounce it, or Stelo, S-T-E-L-O, continuous glucose monitor that I purchased. I recently got one of these specifically because it has integration with my Oura Ring app, which is one of the most important tools that I use to understand my metabolic health. So by using something like the Stelo, you could use the NutriSense. I also love that one. You could use any other number of continuous glucose monitor brands. There are tons on the market now, thankfully. There's also the Levels that's been around for a while and lots of other different sensors. So by using this, you can see, am I someone who has higher blood sugar throughout the day, which would be an indicator that I'm probably more insulin resistant, or am I someone who has lower blood sugar throughout the day, which is an indicator that I'm someone who's more insulin sensitive. Now, remember, I've talked about this in prior episodes, but just as a refresher, on the scale of insulin sensitive over here and really insulin resistance over here, this is a gradation. So as we move along the scale, we get more and more and more insulin resistance until, boom, we hit type 2 diabetes. We don't want to be in this direction. We want to be in this direction. We want to do things to make our bodies more insulin sensitive. We want our bodies to be sensitive to putting carbs in them. So they're like, oh, carbs, glucose, cool. Okay, I know what to do with this. I can put it in the liver. I can put it in the skeletal muscle. And if there's some extra left, then I can store it as body fat. But chances are, if this person is highly insulin sensitive, those carbs are either going to get utilized right away, or they're going to get briefly stored in the liver, or else they're going to get sucked up by the amazing organ of the skeletal muscle, because skeletal muscle loves to suck up carbs like a sponge. It'll help them get bigger. So, second thing that I would look at when I'm trying to decide how much and how often and how much should I be fasting is, what is my average blood sugar and how insulin sensitive or insulin resistant am I? The third thing that I would look at, so first I said I would look at the amount of body fat I have in my body. The second would be, what are my average blood sugars and how insulin sensitive or insulin resistant I am. The third thing I would look at is, what is my stress level like? Okay. And the reason I say that is, it is true that for many people, if they're going to be fasting, especially doing longer term intermittent fasts, that fasting can be a stressor on your system. It can be a stressor on your central nervous system. So if we're someone who is sleeping, heaven forbid, 4 hours a night, we have 7 kids, we have 3 jobs, we're a single mom, do you think that person would benefit from fasting? Absolutely not. They already are maxed out in every single aspect of their stress bucket. And so fasting on top of that would not serve their metabolic health. It's going to work to really pump up their cortisol, which is going to have a downstream effects on their sex hormones, because our hormones operate like a cascade. And because I have to do this as a lawyer, I always say quick sidebar on hormones, just because I think this is important to understand, because fasting impacts your hormone function. And that's why you're receiving so many conflicting messages about it, because guess what, guys? All of us have different hormone function. Some of us have optimized hormones. Our hormones are working optimally. Some of us have very severe hormone dysregulation. And so wherever you are on that spectrum is going to impact your cortisol. And I'm sort of previewing here that this will be my number 4, which is your hormone function. But let me just talk about hormone function now, since I said sidebar. Okay, so I got this from an awesome book that I recommend every woman in her 40s and 50s read, which is a book by Dr. Mindy Peltz called The Menopause Reset. She came out with this book long before she wrote Fast Like a Girl, which also is a fantastic book that I recommend that women read, along with my good friend, dear friend, Cynthia Thurlow, her book, Intermittent Fasting Transformation. I mean, if you want a deep dive into intermittent fasting, I've read all of these books. They're excellent resources to really understand the nitty-gritty of fasting, along with the 2 books that I recommended to you in the last episode, which are by Dr. Stacy Sims, which are called Roar and Your Next Level. Okay, so when we think about hormone function, there is a cascade of hormones. So the top hormone at the top, I want you to think of like a fountain, like a big fountain where the water cascades off the different layers. You could also think of like a big wedding cake where it's tiers on the wedding cake. So at the top tier of the fountain or the cake is oxytocin. This is our master hormone, okay? So oxytocin is the love hormone. It's the ooey gooey, cuddly hormone that we just love to get. So you release oxytocin in a variety of different ways. So for moms, for those of you who breastfeed, anytime you're breastfeeding your baby, you're releasing oxytocin, and so is your baby. For all of my dog moms out there, that would be like me, we are releasing oxytocin when we pet our dogs on the belly. And the greatest part about that is that our dogs are releasing oxytocin at that time too. So I intentionally take breaks during my day to make sure I'm getting down on the ground, either inside or outside with the girls, and giving them lots and lots of pets so that we're all releasing oxytocin, which I just love. You're also, as a human, going to release oxytocin when you look into the eyes of someone you love. Certainly you're going to release oxytocin when you have an orgasm. That's the hormone that we're releasing, which is why people love that hormone. It's like a ooey fluffy, gooey, cuddly hormone, like I mentioned, but you're really going to release it. It's considered the love hormone, the cuddle hormone, and it is the driver of all the other hormones that run downstream from that, down the fountain or down the cake, depending on your metaphor, okay? So what oxytocin is going to drive down to first is a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is our stress hormone. So if you are releasing more oxytocin because you're breastfeeding, you're in love, you're spending time with people you love, you're having orgasms, you're doing the things that really cause you to be in present moment time and like love your life, you should, in theory, be reducing your cortisol response. And your cortisol, of course, is a stress hormone that's released from your adrenal glands, which are two little glands that sit atop your kidneys and your mid-back. So oxytocin, like I said, drives down to cortisol. Cortisol then drives down to this magical hormone that I've talked a lot about on other podcast episodes here, which is called insulin. And the way I want you to think about insulin is that insulin is your fat storage hormone. So when cortisol drives down to insulin, if you are highly stressed out and rushing around all morning from the time that alarm goes off until the time you lay your head down at night, guess what? Your average blood sugars are going to be higher because insulin is higher as a result of cortisol being higher. Does that make sense? So again, oxytocin at the top pushes down to cortisol, pushes down to insulin. So when cortisol's high, you're typically going to have insulin be pumped out instead of having insulin lower because of the stress. Another way I want you guys to think about this is, and this is why I am such a psycho about making sure my clients have good stress management practices, is because the last thing I want to do is have my pancreas shooting out insulin, which tells my body, remember, it tells your body, store fat, store fat, store fat. The last thing I want is insulin coming out of my pancreas constantly all day long. And I'm not even eating like a $5 bakery donut here in Nashville, which is my favorite kind of donut. It, like, honestly, you guys, they call it the 100-layer donut, okay? The 100-layer donut. It's beyond. It is beyond. It's like it's not a cronut, but kind of. It's like a donut mixed with a croissant. Like, who made that? It should be illegal. I love them and hate them at the same time for making it, but it's real good. So when you're super stressed out and you're pumping the cortisol all day long, you could be pumping out insulin out of your pancreas in response to that cortisol, and you're not even eating. So now you're sending the signal that's like, store fat, simply because you're stressed out all the time. I'm like, if I'm going to send the signal to store fat, it better be because I'm head first in a $5 bakery donut. I'm sorry. That's just my preference. I want to eat for an insulin response. I don't want an insulin response because I had stress. I also, by the way, don't want an insulin response because I drank my carbs. That'll be a whole nother topic someday, but I do not want to waste insulin responses on drinking carbohydrates. It's why you won't catch me drinking juice. It's why I'd never drink a soda. It's why I don't drink things like these insanely sugary, complete garbage things like Naked smoothies, like that brand, Naked Smoothies. Just read the carb count. Do yourself a favor and never drink those again. Okay, so that's my sidebar thing about hormones. So we said oxytocin, then pushes down to cortisol, then pushes down to insulin. And then guess what comes after that at the bottom of the fountain? All of your sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, okay? So here we are as women in our 40s and 50s, for those of you who asked this question and wanted me to speak to fasting specifically. And we're already starting to go through these hormonal changes. So the first thing I tell women when we're working together on fixing their hormones is, hang on a second, hang on. We've got to get all of these three top-down hormones working properly first so that we can optimize everything we can at this stage for your estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. Those hormones are directly affected by what's going on with insulin, which is directly affected by what's going on with cortisol, which is directly affected by what's going on with oxytocin. So I see a lot of people, and listen, I'm a huge fan of hormone replacement therapy. I started it a year ago. I love it. I'm glad that I'm on it. And if I'm really honest, I am one of these individuals who had to learn a lot of this the hard way because I was going too hard on cortisol for so many years. You know, I was doing too many things that caused stress in my body, like waking up at 5, running long distances in 0-degree weather, then lawyering all day, then maybe doing another workout. Then I was just running my body into the ground too much. So that, of course, affected my sex hormones. I had a very irregular cycle for a very long time because I was stressing my body too much. So someone in that state probably isn't a great idea to be doing longer fasting, right? I had to learn this the hard way, like I said, because I was doing some longer fasting at that time because I didn't know any better. So it was affecting downstream my sex hormones. So by backing up, when I told you how long and how often should you intermittent fast, when I said I want you to look at first, how much body fat do you have on you? And then also what's your average blood sugar? And then also what's your stress? And now we're obviously talking about, I've sort of sidebar moved into number 4, which is what's the state of your hormone function. I wish I would have known back then, boy, Chris, you don't get regular periods. In fact, you're real regular. Maybe there's something going on with your hormone function and you should be looking upstream. But this was, guys, when I was headfirst into lawyering and marathon running and bodybuilding and all of those before I woke up and went back to school for a lot of these things. And I didn't understand how much I was impacting my hormones at that time. So there could have been a lot I would have done differently then. And I am sharing this with you in part because I want to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. But if you are here as a woman in your 40s and 50s and you're still trying to sort out with everything I've said, okay, but I still don't understand, Kristin, when and how often should I fast? I want you to look at those 4 things for yourself. And then I also want you to consider setting sort of a schedule that either aligns with your cycle if you're still cycling. And you could read the book Fast Like a Girl to learn more about this. The short version is, the best time to fast is the day you get your period and for those next 9 days. And the worst time to fast is the week right before your period. And you also want to back off fasting a little bit when you're ovulating. But we can do a lot longer fast the week that we start bleeding because you can be in more of a ketogenic state, a fasting state, especially if you have excess body fat on your body. So I hope that that's helpful. Okay, so I recommend that women start with I'm going to take 30 days and I'm going to run an experiment. I've been on stages across the country talking about this. I've given a talk on this before, which is, I think it's so interesting how often, and I'd say I'm guilty of this in the past too, but how often we look to others for answers rather than figuring out the answer within ourselves by, and what I mean, hear me when I say this, by conducting experiments on ourselves. Okay, so if you listen to my episode on creatine or listen to it, I'm not sure when that episode comes out, you'll understand that one of the things I talked about in that episode was I did a 3-month experiment on myself taking creatine to see what benefit I would notice, right? I did a DEXA scan. Then I started taking creatine for 3 months. Then I did another DEXA scan. I wanted to see, would it allow me to build more muscle? Would it allow me to lose body fat? Did I notice more strength gains in the gym? Did I feel more energy? Did I feel that my brain was better? I wouldn't have known any of those things simply by asking 17 different health experts what they think about creatine. I figured that stuff out for myself because I did an experiment. So that's what I want you to consider doing with fasting. So maybe what you do is you take a 30-day period. And I think 30-day experiments are great because it typically is enough time to really learn a lot about your body, but not too much time where you're so bored with the experiment that you're like, ugh, I just want to quit this. So what you could consider doing is set a schedule for yourself. And I've done this with many clients. I'm like, look, if you feel like you've been intermittent fasting for a long time and you feel like it's been working for you, but maybe you've noticed a plateau, or maybe you're going through a really stressful period and you feel like you need to back off the fasting, whatever your particular issue is. And so again, I want you to tune into your intuition and answer those questions for yourself. But then you could say, okay, maybe what I'll do is 3 days a week, I'll fast for 13 or 14 hours. Maybe 1 day a week, I might even do a full 36-hour fast. I helped a friend who was frustrated with some excess body fat she had put on during perimenopause. I encouraged her to work up to a 36-hour fast. And God bless her, she's been doing a 36-hour fast every Monday for nearly 2 years. And it's allowed her to take off the weight and keep off the weight while maintaining her lean muscle tissue. And I should also mention about that, and I'm sorry I haven't said that yet, the other thing you guys got to realize is when we are in a fasted state for as long as 36 hours, we're for sure in ketosis at that point because you haven't had any glucose, any dietary fat, your body's now burning body fat, you're using ketones as a fuel source for fuel. And when you're in a ketotic state, when you are in ketosis, when you are ketogenic, that state of metabolic existence does spare your lean muscle tissue. What do I mean by that? It means as long as you're producing ketone bodies, your body is not going to look to your muscle to start cannibalizing your muscle tissue to break it down for fuel. Because that is one of the consequences that some people can have happen to them if they're doing this. I'm not in ketosis, but I don't want to eat. But okay, maybe I'll have like a snack of some kind of food and I'll just really, really lower my calories. And I always say, wait. That's just like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. If we're going to fast, we have to really fast so that we get into ketosis. Maybe during our fast, we have a tablespoon of organic, unrefined virgin coconut oil in our black coffee to help push us in ketosis. Maybe we have some exogenous ketones to make sure we're in ketosis. Maybe we put some MCT oil in our coffee to make sure we're in ketosis. Because being in a ketotic state is going to prevent our body from breaking down our lean muscle tissue, which is one of the reasons I love debunking the myth that fasting makes you lose your muscle. Guys, I don't think I have a problem keeping on muscle, and I fasted for a long time. I did a 5-day fast. I'll do a whole episode about my 5-day fast experiment and give you all the nitty-gritty details about that. It's too detailed to go into here, but I'm going to spoiler alert it for you and tell you that the short version is that during that 5-day fast where I ate no food, okay? Now, keep in mind, I wanted to make sure I was in ketosis, so I did supplement my fast with some exogenous ketones just to make sure I was really, really deep in ketosis. And I did have either a little bit of coconut oil or ghee or butter or something each day, like a tablespoon or so, just to kind of take the edge off if I felt like it was really stressing my system. But in that fast, I lost body fat, of course, I got down to virtually zero visceral fat, which is the most dangerous fat. It's the fat around your organs. And I actually gained muscle. And people don't want to hear me say that because they're so convinced that fasting is so bad for you. And I'm here to tell you, if you are metabolically flexible and your body knows how to get back into ketosis and you can get into a ketogenic state, you don't have to lose muscle when you fast. Now, can you overdo it? Could you fast too much? Could you fast too often? Could you not eat enough? And then all of a sudden start to break down your muscle tissue? Yes. But again, this is why everything is bio-individual and why I very much recommend to my clients and any of you listening, please consider doing a DEXA scan at least once a year, getting bod pods if DEXA scans aren't available in your area. Do something that allows you to conduct a 30-day experiment to say, how did this go for me? Oh, wow. In my 30-day experiment, where I did one 36-hour fast per week, maybe you only did 2 36-hour fasts in that month. Maybe you do it every other Monday or every other Sunday or whatever day you choose that you want to fast all day. Or maybe you say, I'm going to do 1 week where I fast until, 1:00 p.m. every day. And then the next week, I'm not going to fast at all. I'm only going to take 12 hours off of eating. And I'm going to really do this consistent with what my menstrual cycle is. And you notice I felt really good. My brain seemed to feel really good. I didn't have a lot of hunger pains. You do an experiment so that you can measure how well did I do in that 30 days as measured by either a DEXA, a bod pod, your own intuition, how you felt when you journaled, how productive you were, how much better your sleep and other metrics got in your Oura Ring. There's all sorts of things you could do to measure your 30-day experiment. So the controversy on whether or not women should fast and how good or not good it is for you really comes down to what I say is sort of this debate I've been seeing online between, and they eventually did a podcast episode together, which is Dr. Mindy Peltz, who's been promoting fasting for a number of years, and Dr. Stacey Sims, who says, I don't like fasting at all and I don't think women should do it. But the thing that I want to draw your attention to, which I think they finally at least came to on that podcast episode, which I was so glad they were finally providing context for because women are so freaking confused, is Dr. Mindy and Dr. Stacey are working with completely different patient populations. Dr. Mindy's patient population typically is a woman who has a lot of excess body weight, who's hanging on to a lot of excess body fat and wants to lose her body fat. Dr. Stacey Sims is typically dealing with a very lean athlete. These are two totally different women, and the fasting recommendations for those two totally different women is totally different. The woman with excess body fat needs to fast. We need to dip into her body fat stores and use that body fat as fuel in order to burn it off her body to improve her metabolic health. So that's why I say I want you to go back to the questions of how much body fat do I have on my body? What are my average blood sugars? And within that is how insulin resistant or insulin sensitive am I? What are my stress levels? And then what is really the state of my hormones? Because if we ask ourselves those 4 questions, we'll be able to lean into, okay, what is the best fasting protocol for me? And how should I be approaching fasting at this time in my life? And I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's helpful. I would like to go over some of the benefits of fasting because I do think that this gets lost in a lot of the noise around fasting, especially with a lot of this recent news that's saying we shouldn't fast, we shouldn't fast. If you are an extremely lean woman who has very low body fat, who is used to using carbs for fuel, and who doesn't need and has a lot of stressors in her life, then you're probably someone who doesn't need to be practicing fasting, certainly not longer fasting. But I will say, I encourage even those women to learn about fasting as a tool for longevity. And the book that I would recommend that those women or anyone else listening to this who is not sure whether fasting is right for them is called The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance. And I just want to tell you a little story to help contextualize why I'm recommending to you this book. And what that book did for me was to get me to start saying, hang on a second. Why have I run all of these marathons? And I was under the impression that I had to consume these massive amounts of carbohydrates in order to get me ready for these marathons. Why was I eating all of this pasta the night before a marathon? Why was I eating oatmeal or bagels or bananas or all of these carbohydrate-laden foods in the morning before my race? It was a program that I had been taught from the beginning of when I started marathoning that if you want to run long and run well, you obviously need to fuel yourself with carbs. Well, this was completely, my world started to turn upside down about this very topic after I fell in December of 2013 and broke my right leg in 10 places. Now, at the time that I did that, and you can go back to my original episode on my story if you want to hear more about that. But at the time that I had that fall, I had just started to turn the corner around this, I don't know if all these carbs are good for me. And the reason I say that is that I had gotten divorced in May of 2012, and about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I think, after my divorce was final. It was final on May 2nd of 2012. I remember the date. And I ran the Fargo Marathon that May. So I want to say the Fargo Marathon was like the second or third Sunday of the month, whatever. Maybe it was the 24th. And in that marathon, I remember I ran a 3:24, which was not my fastest at that time, but it was a decent weight. Or a decent time rather. I had been running around 3:30, 3:35, kind of leading up to that. And I was excited to break the 3:25. And I remember my ex-husband, shout out to him, who texted me after that marathon and said, wow, it's amazing how fast you can run without a 200-pound monkey on your back, which I thought was kind of a funny thing for him to say. And I'll never forget it. So in any event, I had a really good race that day and I was just sort of high on life and I loved it. But I was what I call at the peak of my carbohydrate fueling for that race. Now, I do remember that the night before, my running group and I had been at some random Italian restaurant in Fargo, and there was some sort of intuition in me that when I ordered my pasta, I was like, you know what? I want to order chicken with it, and I think I'm going to eat more of the chicken and the vegetables that are in the pasta, and I'm not going to eat a ton of the pasta because I've just sort of started to notice that my tummy doesn't feel that good when I do that. It was just something I was picking up on, and so it was an intuition that I started to tune into. But because I had done all of my long runs up until that point and all of my prior marathons up until that point, I think Fargo must have been my, gosh, I don't know, 13th, 14th, 15th marathon. I'm not sure. I've run 25 of them, so I lose track at what one I was at that point. It might have been as close to 20. But in any event, I had run all of those carb fueled. So I still had this programming around, okay, well, I've always taken these goos during every marathon, so I need to make sure I'm having a goo during, my race. So I literally, you guys, and I just think this is so sick because of what I was doing to my poor gut and why I felt like such garbage after that race, even though I was high about my time. I took one of those goo packets, and anyone who's a runner knows what I'm talking about. I took one of those goo packets during that race every 5 miles. Okay, every 5 miles, including before the race started. So imagine I had pasta and some other, that the night before. I'm certain I ate some sort of breakfast with a bagel or something. I really don't remember. And then I had a goo. And then I run 5 miles of the race. I have another goo. I get to mile 10 of the race, another goo. I get to mile 15, another goo. 20, another goo. And I probably did another one at 25. Now, granted, I finished in 3:24. I was thrilled. I was happy about my time. And then I ran straight into a biffy because I had such digestive distress, AKA diarrhea. And like, I was just wrecked. My gut was wrecked from all of that sugar. We aren't supposed to consume that much sugar, guys, even when you're running a marathon. So then, lo and behold, I go forward the rest of that year, and I can't remember whether I ran a marathon that fall. I've got a list of my marathons somewhere. I'm just racking my brain trying to think of what I would have done in the fall of 2012. It probably was Twin Cities. I think it was, but I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't run one. In any event, doesn't matter. I'm bringing that up because in the fall of 2013 is when I fell, or winter of 2013 is when I fell and broke my leg in 10 places. And so while I was healing from my broken leg, I started to see a physical therapist chiropractor who was a very, very thin, wiry guy because he was an ultra runner. And so he'd be working on me and helping me do this PT and working on like adjusting me. And I started to talk to him a lot. His name was Dr. Travis McCarthy. Shout out Travis if you're listening. And he would tell me, because I said, I've run a lot of marathons, but I said, this whole thing you do with like 50K and 100-mile, whatever, 50-mile races, 100-mile races is literally insane to me. And I have zero interest in doing it. So he would laugh and I would ask him, I'm like, what do you eat? Because I did these goos and I had all this gut rot and I can't imagine running longer and taking all these goos. He's like, no, I'm not, I don't eat a bunch of carbs. I'm eating fat. And I was like, huh? What do you mean you're eating fat? And he was saying, I'm eating things like macadamia nuts. I'm eating like packets of nut butter. I'm eating coconut oil. He's eating fat that fuels himself because fat, if you picture a fire, and everyone in this listening to this knows what it looks like to either has created their own fire, been around someone who starts a fire. You have logs that you put on the fire, and underneath those logs, you've got sticks and you have newspaper, right? And I always tell people that carbs are just like the newspaper and the sticks on the fire. And the fat is like those logs. The fat burns long and it burns for hours, and you can run and run and run and run and run on fat. You can sprint very well on carbs, but you can run for long distances on fat. So if you have ever heard of the saying when it comes to marathoning, which is that when you run past mile 20, you quote unquote have to break through the wall. It's like they call it the invisible wall. In fact, in the Twin Cities Marathon, they actually have a whole like fake wall put up around the course to like emphasize for people like, yes, you're breaking through the wall. What the wall really is, you guys, from a metabolic perspective, is at the time at which your body, if you're not jamming goos down your throat like I was, it's the time at which your body runs out of carbohydrates or glycogen and then has to switch over to fat. Okay. At some point, when you stop consuming carbs for a while and you keep running and running and running and running, your body will deplete all of its glycogen stores and it will switch over. Remember in the first fasting episode where I said our first fuel source is carbs / glucose. And then once we run out of that, we have to go to dietary fat. That's what starts to happen in the marathon. So now we're switching over to becoming a fat burner, and that transition can be a little uncomfortable for people. People are on the struggle bus at mile 20 most of the time. And then all of a sudden they'll flip a switch and they're like, oh my gosh, the lights just came on. I feel so much better. Now I can finish this race. And it's because they're switching over from the substrate of carbohydrate to the substrate of fat in order to fuel and move their muscles and their body. Okay. So I'm telling you all of this because I want to get to the point in terms of fasting that I think will be helpful for context for people as you're trying to decide what to do. So I have this leg break. I meet this physical therapist chiropractor in 2014. I start to get really interested in fat fueling. I started to do some experiments around it for 2014. I get way more into it during 2015. And part of the reason was that I started marathon training in 2015 because after I had all of this metal put into my leg in 2013 to heal from my leg break, I had all of the metal taken out in December of 2014. And then I really started to run hard again. I had been running throughout 2014 anyways after I healed from my leg break. But once I got the metal out, I was like, okay, it's time for my comeback marathon. So one of the goals I set for myself is when I run my comeback marathon in October of 2015, I'm running it as a fat-fueled athlete for the first time. I'm not doing this carb thing. I'm not doing this big pasta dinner, eat the bagels, have the oatmeal. I want to see how I could perform for 26.2 miles of running if I start at the starting line of the race as a fat-fueled athlete rather than waiting until mile 20 to have my body switch over. And you guys, I'm proud to inform you that it was my best and fastest marathon. I ran a 3:19 that year at Twin Cities in October of 2015. And I have never run a marathon where I felt so incredible the entire race. It was like I was in rocket fuel because I was literally running basically in a ketogenic state. Now, if I had to go back in time, I would have tested my ketones at the beginning of the race. I wish I would have done that, but I can tell you what I ate. The night before the race, my pre-race meal was a filet mignon with asparagus and butter. That's what I had. I didn't eat bread. I didn't eat carbs. I didn't eat any of that. And then the morning of the race, rather than having oatmeal or a bagel or any of those foods, I had one packet of Artisana coconut butter. Okay, coconut butter is awesome. It tastes great. It's about 200 calories in a packet and it's like 20 grams of fat and I think two carbs. So that's what I had. So I started out as a fat-fueled athlete at the starting line and I just continued. It's amazing for fatty acid oxidation. There's so many different metabolic reasons that you would want to run a race in a fat-fueled state instead of in a carb state. And so I really recommend the art and science of low carbohydrate performance if you want to learn more about that, because it really was traumatic for me. And I tell you that lengthy story because I want you to understand that really one of the opportunities that you have as you explore what's right for your body in terms of fasting is, have I ever really allowed myself to get and be in ketosis for a long period of time? And what would that feel like? And you know, how would I know and what sort of experiment would I create? I will do for you another episode all about ketosis because I know people have a lot of questions about it, but I've already been going on for a while here. I think we're about almost 40 minutes into this podcast. So I want to make sure that I am wrapping this up relatively soon. And I want to do that by just talking about some of the benefits of fasting for those of you who might consider either creating sort of a structured fasting practice, just experimenting with it or doing it here and there and just noting how you feel. Okay. And by the way, before I go through these benefits of fasting, just to leave you with that, because I'd like to sort of close out the episode that way, I do want to remind you that in terms of technology that can really help you understand your body better, I can't say enough about my favorite two devices in this realm, which are, I've already talked about it today, my Oura Ring. And so I'll make sure I put a link underneath this video for Oura Ring. You can get a discount there. I've been wearing an Oura Ring. I was one of the earliest adopters of Oura Ring. I've been wearing one for over 6 years. And I've had 4, if not 5 or 6 of these rings now. I wanted gold when they upgraded to gold. I wanted silver when I lost my original stealth one. So I've had a lot of different ones and I really, really love it. And there's no better tool, I think, for learning about and understanding your metabolic health, from how you sleep to what's my heart rate, to what's my heart rate variability, how stressed am I during the day, how many steps did I have during the day, how recovered am I. It is just so valuable for so many reasons. So Oura Ring, I highly recommend. And then the other device, which I've already also talked about that I can't say enough about, is this Stilo continuous glucose monitor, or just any glucose monitor. The reason I like this one, like I mentioned, is it does integrate with the Oura. So I love that they have that functionality together, but you could get any sort of continuous glucose monitor and learn about your body in terms of experiments, from what does make my blood sugar go higher, what does make my blood sugar go lower. Tip for anyone who wants to do this experiment: there is nothing that lowers my blood sugar, other than fasting, of course, nothing that lowers it like acupuncture and meditation. When I get off the acupuncture table, my blood sugar is as low as it ever is. Why? Because remember, guys, I've already told you about the hormone fountain: oxytocin, cortisol, insulin. Cortisol is low, not even coming out of my adrenals when I'm in acupuncture. I am so low stress that their insulin response is like nothing. And so my blood sugar goes down, right? Because remember, when your blood sugar goes up, insulin comes out of your pancreas. When your blood sugar goes down, and if it goes down and it's too far below that off of the teaspoon, then you'll start to secrete glucagon rather than insulin from your pancreas, and glucagon will help you burn fat. There's a whole other episode I did about that, which is why or how we get fat. Make sure you listen to that one if you haven't already. Okay, so Lana and I talk now about the benefits of fasting because these are some of my favorites. I'm just going to look back at my notes after I have a sip of water here because I've talked about a lot of them already, but I just want to go over them one more time for you. Okay, so obvious benefit of fasting, especially if you have body fat to lose is that fasting can help you lose weight. It really can help with fat loss. It also can improve your insulin sensitivity because, of course, you are now teaching your body how to become more metabolically flexible. We're going to burn off all the glycogen, which is stored glucose. It's stored carbohydrate. We store glycogen in our liver. We store glycogen in our skeletal muscle. And then any other stored glucose that we have that's more than our liver can hold and more than our skeletal muscle can hold goes into our adipose tissue, which is our fat tissue, as the storage form, which is called triglycerides. It essentially is like blood fat. Okay, so it's going to improve your insulin sensitivity. It's going to train your body how to burn its own fat for fuel, of course, because of the reasons I just described. It's going to, of course, once you get into that fat burning state, it's going to allow your body to produce ketones. So that's an excellent reason to consider fasting. Here's one I haven't talked about, and this has been very impactful for me. It helps to break your emotional distortions around food. I remember the first time I did a 36-hour fast, certainly the first time I did a 72-hour fast, and definitely when I was in my 5-day fast. There is nothing like forcing yourself to go without food for a period of time that will make you more aware of your habits around eating when you are not hungry, okay? So we have these emotional distortions because many of us, me included, and I'm sure many of you, food in our society is used for emotional reasons, both good and bad. Food is pleasure, which is amazing. I'm not saying we should never have pleasure around food. I get pleasure around food every single day. I love food. And there's lots of good foods that are good for me that give me pleasure. There's also bad foods for me that give me pleasure. And I hate using the term good and bad because nothing really is good or bad. It just is. But, you know, I'm not sitting here, and I don't like pizza. Pizza is not one of my go-to foods. So I'll use pizza as an example. I'm not sitting here eating some sort of large, gross, bad for me Domino's pizza every day, right? If I was, there's probably some underlying emotional reason that I'm doing that because I intellectually understand it's not good for me. It does nothing for my it doesn't give me any nutrient density. It doesn't help my brain. It doesn't help my skin. It doesn't help my gut. It doesn't help my metabolic health. Like there's nothing good about it. So if I was continuing to make decisions around that, or let's say I was eating that when I wasn't hungry, it would have to be for an emotional reason. Right? So it forces you to take a look at how often do I really go in the fridge or the cupboard for reasons other than hunger? Do I go there for habit? Is it because I'm bored? Is it because I'm trying to reduce my stress? Is it because I had a fight with my husband? Is it because I'm mad at my kid? Is it because I don't like my work thing? Whatever. I had a fight with my parent. It doesn't matter. I mean, I always give this example to clients, you know, when I was, younger, and I'm sure a lot of you had this experience, it's like anything, you're crying, your parents give you a snack, like, oh honey, let me get you a snack. It's like what I do with my dogs. I want to give them a treat, right? We celebrate in positive ways, having cupcakes at birthdays, having cake at birthdays, having celebratory food things. And then also, if we're sad, what do? We eat ice cream. Our parents give us cookies, like they want to cheer us up. So it's so programmed in our society to eat for so many reasons that we're not hungry, and fasting forces you to take a look at those for you. So that's another benefit, I would say. Fasting also helps you sharpen your mental focus and clarity, which has been huge for me. I noticed that definitely. It increases your energy. I want you to think about when you're fasting, just go back to our caveman type of lifestyle. Go back to thousands of years ago. Why would we be fasting? We would be fasting because we don't have food. That's why we would have fasted. Now, we never have to fast because we have literally tens of thousands of calories sitting in our cupboard or in our fridge at any given time because we live in a land of abundance. When we didn't live in a land of abundance, fasting was, food was scarce. And so what would happen in that circumstance? Well, as the human who's got survival mechanisms in their body, who has a biology that's driven to be wired for survival, you would start producing ketones, start having your brain be very acute if you went without food, because you have to be very precise, for example, with your bow and arrow to be able to kill that animal, to bring that animal back for yourself and your family, to be able to survive, to eat that animal for survival. So you would have an increased mental acuity, sharpness, and an increase in energy and mental focus in order to be able to survive. And so it's a built-in survival mechanism that we have when we are fasting. It also, and I think this is one of the biggest benefits I also haven't talked about other than my crazy Fargo Marathon story from 2012, it gives your digestive system a break. You know, I tell clients who have major digestive issues, whether it's some sort of IBS they're dealing with, some sort of ulcerative colitis, I have clients that have a host of different digestive issues. We work on a particular fasting program for them so that they can give their digestive system a break and allow those tissues, those cells, those organs, those glands to heal. We can give them healing powers by giving them a break so they're not having to work on overdrive for us all the time. I talked about this in the first episode. It creates autophagy. Autophagy is simply self-eating. We're going to eat up those dead, decrepit, older, diseased cells that we don't want hanging around. I certainly don't want cancer cells hanging around in my body. And so we're going to give ourselves an opportunity to get rid of those, to destroy them, and to get them disposed of within our bodies. Also, I haven't talked about this, but the last two things I'll say about fasting, which I just love, is fasting saves you money. Guess how much money I spent on food during my 5-day fast? Yeah, you're right. $0. $0. So when I hear from people that they complain that organic food is expensive, grass-fed, pasture-raised, oh my gosh, Kristin, all this stuff you recommend, it's more expensive. It is. And if you engage in fasting practices along with eating well, it all comes out in the wash, right? I would rather have you do that and spend more money purchasing the organic raspberries than eat the raspberries that are filled with herbicides and pesticides and do your cells a favor so that you can age well and live long and healthy. Okay, and last but certainly not least, and I know that you will laugh when I say this one because it is my brand, is that fasting makes you more efficient with your time. When I have an all-day fast, or let's say I'm fasting until 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., the amount of work that I can accomplish from the time that I get up, go to the gym, get home, do all of that work before I break my fast with a meal, it's like gangbusters. It's on because I'm not having to stop to cut vegetables, to heat something up, to cook something in the oven, to cook something on the stove. That is a break in whatever I'm doing that makes me less efficient. So fasting for any period of time is also going to make you more efficient with your time. I hope you have found this fasting second episode, or I'll call it my sequel to fasting. So episode number 2. I hope you found it helpful, that it answered a number of your questions, and that you learned some additional nuggets that you may not have heard before. I can't wait to have you back for another episode. Thank you again for being part of my community and for watching and listening to the Energetically Efficient Show. I appreciate you.